Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Tom Talks Film. In this episode, we're going to take a look at Mabel Normand's directorial career while at the Keystone Film Company, the 15 films she's credited with directing between 1914 and 1915, and who some consider to be an early female comedic auteur. In 1892, Mabel Normand was born in New Brighton, New York, now a neighborhood on the North Shore of Staten Island in New York City. At 16 years old, she started working for D.W. Griffith at the Biograph Company, where she would go on to meet actor and film director Max Sennett. While there are many rumors circulating about a potential relationship between Sennett and Normand, there's also a lot of uncertainty. What we do definitively know is that in 1912, Sennett and Normand left Biograph, made their way across the United States to Los Angeles, where Sennett founded the Keystone Film Company. While Sennett is recognized as the company's original founder, the New York Motion Picture Company was the initial funding source and parent company. Additionally, the New York Motion Picture Company also owns several other companies, all located at the same address in Los Angeles, including ones like the Bison Film Company. Following Normand's departure from Keystone in 1916, she would go on to open Mabel Normand Studio at the corner of Bates and Effie Street in Los Angeles, where she lived right next door. Unfortunately, her studio shut down after significant reshuffling of her parent company. However, the studio building itself would have multiple owners until it settled into the hands and became what it is still today, the Max Sennett Studios. Starting in 1910 and over the course of her lifetime, Mabel performed in over 200 films. As a child, she was diagnosed with pulmonary tuberculosis that became increasingly painful, and by the time of her last film in 1927, it was so painful that she checked into the Pottinger Sanatorium, where a few years later in 1930 she would pass away. To say the least, Mabel's life and career played a significant role in the early years of Hollywood and its growing film industry. This is certainly evident when we consider the company she kept. At her funeral, the pallbearers of her casket included Douglas Fairbanks, D.W. Griffith, Louis B. Mayer, Max Sennett, Samuel Goldwyn, and Charlie Chaplin, amongst others. If we jump back to 1914 and 15, Mabel is credited with having directed 15 films for Keystone Film Company. Of these films, 10 are known to exist in various degrees. 9 are narrative-based slapstick comedy shorts, and the last represents an educational travel film. In examining all of the known films directed by Mabel, including her travel film, there seems to be two prominent threads that link all of them together. The first convention and overarching genre is that of slapstick comedy, and the second thread represents a romance between two principal characters, most often including Mabel herself. Interestingly enough, many of her films are constructed around, include, or indirectly address social issues of her time, with many existing in contemporary times. One of the more consistent examples is that of domestic violence, where Mabel often is depicted as fighting back against her male attackers. In many of her films, Mabel is relentlessly pursued by multiple male suitors, even after rejecting those seeking romantic relationships. For instance, in Mabel's Strange Predicament, Chaplin's character, the Tramp, drunkenly harasses Mabel after she's locked out of her hotel room. Sexual harassment remains another common thread throughout a number of her films, including many depictions of Mabel being sexually groped by various characters. In response, Mabel fights back against these actions with her own physical violence, presenting a visual representation that no very much means no. In their relentless pursuit of Mabel, several of the presented male characters utilize various manipulative techniques in an attempt to win or force Mabel to their side. These include, but are not limited to, lying, general acts of deception, or the continued pestering until they receive a desired response. When these male characters do not receive the attention they seek, they respond with physical violence directed towards either the other male suitor or more often towards Mabel herself. These acts often depict varying degrees of domestic violence between romantic partners and or various family members. However, there are a few social issues less frequently expressed in her films that also warrant a mention. For instance, while her directed films range in socioeconomic status, class conflict does play a significant role in her film Caught in a Cabaret. Here, the lower-class tramp relentlessly pursues an upper-class Mabel by manipulating the truth in an attempt to win her over. Gender and identity questions take center stage in her film Mabel's Blunder. Here, Mabel and her brother trade clothing as she secretly injects herself while her fiance Harry mistakenly courts her lookalike sister. Then, disguised in Mabel's clothing, her brother is mistakenly courted by Harry's father, who is also romantically interested in Mabel. This ultimately leads to calamity and includes the use of domestic violence. In 1915, Mabel co-directed a film with Fatty Arbuckle where they visited the World's Fair held in San Francisco. And even though Keystone released this film as an educational video, there are still traces of romance and slapstick violence. On the left, you can see a portrayal of the romance between the two actors, and on the right, Fatty accidentally closes an Iron Maiden with Mabel inside. During her years at Keystone, Mabel was engaged in many aspects of the movie-making process. She primarily served as the leading lady by performing as a comedic star and is often credited as a writer on many of their films. Chaplin, Arbuckle, and Normand quite regularly rotated through these creative positions. However, in the existing films where Mabel served as and is credited with being the director, physical or slapstick comedy is used to bring humor to the audience as a vehicle to discuss broader social issues like sexual harassment, deception, domestic violence, gender and identity questions, and so much more. Following her departure from Keystone, and as far as we know, Mabel never directed again. However, her presence and knowledge remained invaluable on many productions until her last. Thank you for watching this episode of Tom Talks Film. My sources for this video are listed here and in the description below. Until next time, get out there and make something funny.